Let's talk about like what is a healthy amount of sugar. And when I say sugar, this is not refined sugar. It's called carbs. So carbs is sugar. It's in starchy forms or it could be refined sugar or whatever. All of it is going to affect your blood sugar. So when I'm talking about this, it's going to be related to carbs. Let's say you have prediabetes. You're not diabetic yet, but you have prediabetes. It's a good idea to start getting 60 grams or less of sugar a day. If you stick at 60, it's good. If you get a little bit lower at 50, even better. But that's going to be a good, healthy amount of carbs per day in your diet. Let's say you don't have blood sugar dysregulation at all. Your cells are good and healthy. They're reacting to the insulin really well. You could keep your blood sugar 125 or lower. You don't have to be as strict there. Just to give you an idea, the average American gets 250 plus carbs per day in their diet. So it's not that difficult to get over 125 grams of carbs. So you need to be really cognizant of it. And we really need to decrease the amount of sugar that we're getting into our diet. So let's talk about all the sugars out there, the different forms, and does this really matter with blood sugar regulation? The chemical structures are really what makes it different. We got sucrose, we got fructose, we have allulose, we have maltose. I'm not going to dive into like organic chemistry and all that or anything like that. So you have a good understanding there. But what they do is they have a different molecular structure, which makes them a little bit different. But long story short is they're not going to do anything different with blood sugar at all. Fructose is going to spike your blood sugar just like sucrose. If you eat a fruit, it's going to probably increase it just as much as sucrose. Now, the difference is this is what I would like to help people understand. Let's say someone drinks a cup of grape juice and someone drinks a cup of Coke. Their blood sugar is going to spike because they're both just sugar without any fiber in there. If you have a fruit, that's going to change things, not because of the fructose in there. It's not that because of the sugar type. It's because of the fiber that is in there and how much fiber it has based on how much it is actually going to affect your blood sugar and how much is actually going to be absorbed. We have something called a net carb. So you could look these things up online. You could be like, oh, how many carbs does an apple have? But I actually like to do how many net carbs does apple have? Because that subtracts how many fibers it has. Because how much fibers it has is going to decrease how much is actually, because fiber is included in that total carbohydrate and that isn't absorbed at all. So that doesn't matter with calculating your carbohydrates per day. So yeah, if you get lactose or if you get fructose or you get sucrose, it doesn't matter. All of it's going to spike your blood sugar. It doesn't matter what form it's in. So let's talk about if there's a certain carb that is better than another carb. So an apple is definitely better than just having a full tablespoon of cane sugar. Reason for that, one is apple has a lot more nutrients in there. Another is it has fiber in there, and that's going to really affect how the blood sugar gets absorbed and also the nutritional value and how it's going to support your cells. And cane sugar is pure just calories. But let's say we just took all the sugar out of the apple, like an apple juice, for example. Let's say someone drinks some apple juice or they just take a tablespoon of sugar. Not going to be a lot different for your blood sugar at all. But if they have the full fruit, completely different scenario. But let's say, is it better for someone to have a can of Coke or a piece of white bread? I don't know the exact number of how many carbs are in a piece of white bread. I think it's about 35 grams or so. Similar to a can of Coke is about 30 grams. It's around there. So they are going to be quite similar. But the interesting thing on the glycemic index is actually white bread is a ton worse than a can of Coke. Believe it or not. That's crazy to think about, right? Let's say a white bread and the glycemic index is 100. Cane sugar is 60. So 40% less according to the glycemic index. So very interesting things there. So how you eat it does affect it, but sugar is sugar. But there are certain sugars that are going to spike your blood sugar more than others based on the glycemic index of like sucrose being better than white bread, for example. So does it say anything about like how much is going to spike your blood sugar according to the glycemic index on a nutrient label? No. All it's going to tell you is what added sugar it has and also the total carbohydrate, and it will tell you the fiber. So you could figure out the net carb by subtracting the total carb from the total fiber, and you could get how much carbs it has in there. And really, like, added sugar is worse for reasons for inflammation and stuff, but not for blood sugar at all. So you're going to see the net carbs, subtracting the carbs from the fiber. So you're going to get your net carbs. That's going to spike your blood sugars. That's what you need to be looking at of what's going to happen. Now, every body is a little bit different, and these are basic scenarios. So to really know if you're really interested about what happens with food in your specific body, is you could get one of those constant blood sugar monitoring tools that has a Bluetooth that goes directly to your phone. One of them's like Dexcom, there's like Freestyle Libre. They're a little expensive. They're like $1,000 or something. Your insurance will cover it if you're diabetic many times. But if you're not, like pre-diabetic, they're not gonna cover it. But that can give you a really good look of what is happening with food directly. Because these things are basic that I'm telling, this is gonna be the case for most people, but not everyone. So let's dive into like sugars, carbs, proteins, fats, how they're absorbed. Are they absorbed in a different way? So there are different individual sugars out there, and they do have a different effect on their absorption. Fructose and sucrose really aren't that much different. But if we look at allulose, for example, this is a natural sugar. It comes from maple syrup and it comes in figs. It's a small portion of those foods. But that specific sugar doesn't really get absorbed at all. So you could eat that sugar and it's not going to spike your blood sugar at all because of its certain structure and how it gets absorbed into the bloodstream. There's going to be a difference in how your blood sugar is regulated based on the sugar. And so carbs isn't absolutely perfect there, but it is a good indicator because like allulose is a very rare sugar. Now, if you buy it separately and you start eating allulose, that could be a great option. And there is research helping with insulin sensitivity and helping with blood sugar regulation with taking allulose. And I do like that sugar. Another one's like stevia, right? That's a natural sugar that doesn't get absorbed either. But majority of sugars out there, fructose and sucrose, the main ones that we get in our diet are going to absorb similarly. But we do have coconut sugar, which does definitely spike your blood sugar, but it doesn't absorb as quickly as fructose or sucrose. So this might be getting a little confusing for people, but there are differences in the sugar, but not a ton. And you just need to know what sugars aren't going to be absorbed and which ones are to really be understanding of what is going to affect your blood sugar. Now, is there a difference in a carb? And I think what people mean that carbs aren't created equal is it depends upon, okay, the individual sugar that I just talked about. Sure, that has an effect. But also it's about the fiber that is in there. Because all foods had a little bit of different amount of soluble or insoluble fiber. And that greatly slows down the sugar absorption. And the big problem is the spike. That's what leads to insulin resistance. Is the body constantly having these huge spikes, these huge surges of insulin, and then you have too much insulin in response to that. That's going to help really affect your weight also because you're putting way too much sugar inside your cell and your body's just going to use that, be overloaded with energy and make it into fat. So let's talk about like individual carbs and how they are different. So let's talk about maybe a yam and white rice, for example. The yam is going to be better for your blood sugar regulation than the white rice. The reason for that is it's higher in fiber and it's going to be slower absorption. Even though a yam is really high in carb, and if you really are trying to follow a low carb diet, yam probably isn't the best thing for you, except if you're really going to be cognizant of what you're eating in the other meals. It is much better than white rice. If you're going to follow a low carb diet, white rice is definitely out. That is extremely difficult. It's going to spike your blood sugar really quick. But we're just looking at carbs. So we can't just look at carbs themselves. We need to look at the fiber content. And that's the really big difference between a yam and a white rice. If you take out all the fiber in there, there's hardly any in there. And the yam still has a lot of its fiber still in there. And it's going to slowly trickle that sugar in instead of this big whammy blood sugar spike that happens with like white bread or white rice. Now let's talk about how the body uses protein and fat for energy. So fat doesn't get broken down into sugar at all. So you're going to slowly absorb that and it's going to be used as fat energy. It definitely does get stored. You eat too much fat, it's going to be stored and does have possibility to make you fat if you do that. It is calories and it's much higher calorie per gram, right? 1 gram of fat has 9 calories to it. 1 gram of protein or carbohydrate has 4. So you're getting more than twice as much calories in fat. But you do get a lot more satisfied with fat because your body's going to sense it. It's not going to cause these insulin spikes at all. When you eat fat, it's not going to really increase your insulin at all. If you eat protein, it does increase your insulin a little bit. And protein does made into glucose eventually in your body. But it's a much slower process. It gets absorbed much slower. And your body has to go through a lot of mechanisms of action to actually make it into a glucose molecule. But your body doesn't use the amino acids directly for energy. It will use the amino acids for making tissue or helping cellular function and all that type of stuff. But it does get broken down into eventually glucose and it's used in that way. So let's talk about maybe like a general idea of what can be like a 60-gram carb per day or 125-gram per day. This isn't going to be perfect, but this will give you a general idea. So in the morning, a great thing to do if you're going to keep your blood sugar below 60 is an egg breakfast is a great thing to eat. And what I do, I really like to add a lot of low carb veggies to it too. So spinach, extremely low in carbs. Tomatoes are low in carbs. Onions are decently low in carbs. And then like a bell pepper, decently low in carbs. But let's say you have 3 eggs and you have half a cup of all these veggies and just one whole cup or 1.5 cups of spinach. That's going to keep your carbs at like 12 at that point. You're starting out your morning really great. Then you go into the afternoon, and maybe what you want to do is you want to have a protein, usually like a meat of some sort, not a protein like you don't want a carby protein like beans, for example, but you could have a lot of nuts and seeds, and those are perfect too. So you have like a protein, let's say like 4 ounces of chicken, and then you have low starchy vegetables like cauliflower and maybe a salad of some sort. Then for dinner, you could go with it's usually a protein of some sort and then a low carb veggie. If you've kept your carbs low enough, like what I've talked about right now, it's probably you've only had half your carbs so far. You've only had 30 carbs. So you could eat a lot more carbs for dinner if you like. You can mix this up. And maybe you can add a fruit in there that's higher in sugar. Maybe you could add a cup of blueberries. Maybe you could add an apple. The apple is going to be a little bit harder because that's actually 26 grams of carbohydrates. So you need to be really cognizant of what you're eating. Blueberries is going to be 8 grams of carbohydrates. So that's going to be a much better option. Strawberries and raspberries are great. And you could add that throughout the morning or the afternoon because they're really low in sugar, like 7 grams per cup of strawberries or raspberries, for example. So they're a really good option there. So that's a general idea of keeping your carbs under 60. You could add a lot more carbs if you're going 125. So you can more like have oatmeal. I would like to do an oatmeal, half of oatmeal and then half nuts and seeds. And then for lunch, you could possibly even go with a sandwich. That would work for you if you would like to go that route. You could add more fruit into your diet. Like you could do a protein and some salad, and then you could add an apple or something like that. And then you could eat some beans, or you could eat a little bit of rice. You could eat a little bit of potato, a little bit of yams for dinner added into your diet if you're going with 125 grams per day of carbohydrate. So, yeah, if you want to know more information about your diet, blood sugar regulation, or anything else, visit my website, integrativemedica.com. Find our phone number there. Give my receptionist a call. You can set up a visit or with some of my other great doctors that we have at my clinic. You could also set up a visit directly online through the tab that we have on our website. If you want to learn more about blood sugar spikes and more about diet, click my videos to the right. I'm Dr. Jake, and I'll see you there.